He's looking for the
picture.
Yeah.
So, before we do anything, we always light a candle.
How you doing?
Hey, brother, how's Joel feeling? How's Joel feeling?
Fortunately, he's fine.
Okay, so we always light a candle.
therapy.
The reason we light a candle is to remember that when we study, it's a holy activity. So that we actually do the holy life and say a blessing as we do. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kirishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. 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 Okay, the other thing we do, this one is almost full. Orlando, would you pass me a cherry box that is empty, please? So you always give charity before you study. This is not charity for the synagogue. This is charity that goes to other causes or wherever else it may be. And the reason we do is so that the angel of charity blesses our study. So we'll also do that. All right.
What did that prayer mean? I must have.
The
Then I
prayer
got to
that
around.
I
I got
said,
that soap, but I didn't get
put in this one because this is actually. Well, let me give you this charity box. This is charity to the temple. That's to go. Orlando?
One of these boxes in about 50 years.
There you go.
50 years, yeah, that box.
Yeah, that's changed.
So,
So they the prayer actually means that we're blessing you, bless you, Lord God, who is the universe, who sanctified us with your commandments and commanded us to study the words of Torah.
the words. Okay, that was
The divrei.
The divrei. Okay.
The bear. Okay, so
It's a tough box. You're never going to get it out.
Yeah. The rest I did the day. Okay, so a couple of things, and we're going to go over a lot of stuff over however many months it takes to go over stuff. Okay, there's no time frame. It's so weird. I can't sit down. I really want to, but it's hard for me to sit down. I'm sorry. I really love this stuff. Are you laughing at me or with me? Because I really do love it.
You remind me of me when I'm teaching.
I love it.
But you are young, I'm old, and then I don't.
No, this is.
Older.
You look much younger. So I think I look good for 85. What do you think?
Oh wow, you look like 75.
Thank you. Not so good for my age, but for okay. So there's some books, and I will constantly be bringing books every week for you to learn, study, write down. This is the most important one. Is the Tanakh. I prefer this particular edition. It's by Art Scroll Publishers. The reason is, oh, let me get some hair too. Thank you. The reason is because it's a straight Hebrew to English translation, as opposed to going through 7 other translations to get to this. So I would recommend you can get these online, and we'll pass around.
And so each of us should bring our own Tanakh.
You should bring your Tanakh, yes.
Oh.
Okay, and this is I haven't really liked this particular version. There's also one by JPS. Excuse me?
Mine's
Amazon.
very small.
Amazon.
Yeah, and they have little ones and they have big
Yeah,
ones.
mine's like this big. Is that okay?
Same thing. No, yeah, well, your eyes are probably better than mine.
Okay, probably.
This is a fabulous book. Okay, not my favorite for it's a little dry, but it is a fabulous book because it goes over all of the holidays in Judaism, and it talks about their historical value, how they came about. It talks about what are their how do you practice it, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so it's a great book. It doesn't talk about spirituality a whole lot, but it really is a fabulous book to start to understand this. We're gonna have a lot of books. This is a commentary on Ketuvim, which is the writing section. The author is kind of a pain, but it's actually you were looking at this, weren't you?
I just finished. I'm like 10 pages left.
Okay, so this is also a book
Great.
to get.
Yeah, it's a great book.
I'm going to go through. I'm going to bring lots and lots of books as we go through every week as we start going through categories. We're going to learn together. Okay.
That's the one.
Let's talk about Judaism.
Yeah.
I'm going to go over some basic.
It's just-
So first of all, the first thing to understand is that in Judaism, we are a tradition of action more than we are faith. Okay? All theologies want you to believe in God and also act righteously. But if you can only do one and you're Catholic, then Catholicism says, have faith, because the priest can forgive you. Judaism says, act righteously. To the extent that it even says in the Yerushalmi Talmud that God says, better you don't believe in me, but act righteously with each other. Okay? So it's very much about action. We see that greatly in the wedding ceremony. Can I borrow the two of you? I'll follow you multiple times. Come be Vanna White. So I'll use you later too. But when can we sit up and look around this? I'll buy a new one, a bigger one.
Yeah, the small one.
Okay.
I get it.
Right. So when a couple gets married, we don't have these questions of I do. What happens is he puts the ring on her index finger, saying, with this ring you are consecrated to me according to the laws of Moses in Israel, both Hebrew and English. And if she accepts it, she puts it on her ring.
Oh, I put it on my.
You put it on your own ring finger. That's
Oh.
accepting it. So it's a demonstration of action. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. That's Judaism, as opposed to a priest saying, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded blankety blank? And so I do. This is action. So Judaism is about action. The other thing to understand about Judaism is that we have what is called portable only. So typically, an indigenous culture is conquered by another culture. And then what happens? They move off their indigenous land and they lose their spirituality. The Dalai Lama, when Tibet was conquered by China, first people the Dalai Lama wanted to meet with was a group of rabbis. He wanted to say, how did you survive for 2,000 years without your home? And the answer is, very simply, what we call a portable home. And that is this book, and it's the Siddur, the prayer book that we use. That also, those two things in the calendar, they combine, and we have a portable homeland, so we can be Jewish anywhere, everywhere. Okay? Let's talk a little bit about some basic concepts in Judaism, or some how we're going to look at things. The goal is that all of us walk out of this thinking like rabbis. See, Judaism, traditionally, we'll go through this over time, doesn't think rationally. Neither do we think irrationally. We think non-rationally. Meaning that the way our brain works is actually circuitous. If one thing triggers another memory, triggers another thought, etc. That's how Judaism works. And so that's part of what we're going to learn to do, to think like rabbis. In some rabbis' cases, that's a little scary. But we're still going to be able to do it. Okay? So a couple of terms that I really want to make sure you're aware of. The first is Tanakh. Tanakh is an acronym for Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim. Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible, those 5 scrolls that we have in a scroll. Nevi'im means prophets, it's prophetic section. Ketuvim means writings, it's the writing section. Job, Psalms, those things. And anytime you have a question, just chime in, right? One of the things that's very important to understand is that God's name, it's Yud He Vav He, YHWH, HVH. In Hebrew, when we write a Hebrew word, those are the consonants, and the vowels go underneath. But in the Torah, there's no vowels. That's fine if you know Hebrew for most words. But all 4 letters of God's name, the Yud, that's the Yud, the He, the Vav, and the He, are soft letters. I mean, they can be pronounced, the Y could be silent, Y or J. The He could be could be silent, and even if it's the wrong part of the word. The Vav could be a V, a W, an O, or an U sound. And the He again could be this different sound. So we don't know, is it Yehuwu, Yahweh, Jehovah, Jehovah, Yahweh. And so since we don't, because there's no vowels, and so we don't want to offend God, right? You wouldn't like me calling you, instead of Alan, calling you Ellen, or calling you Eleni, or calling you Lana, right? So do you like that? That's a whole other dialogue.
Try it out.
I'll start calling you So instead, we have a couple of names. The two major names we say are either Hashem, which is the Hebrew word that means the name, or Adonai, which means my master. Scholars call this the Tetragrammaton. That's what academics call it, meaning it's a four-lettered name. Okay, tell me at any point you're lost. You got that look.
We're not lost at all. I got it.
So we often
Little question. One of those two, some Jewish people don't, they choose to not say it, they say another one, so would it be?
we say Hashem or Adonai. Baruch atah
Okay,
Hashem,
okay.
Baruch atah Adonai.
Okay.
Okay. So or they'll change it. So instead of Eloheinu, they'll say Elokeinu. Right? That's where it comes from. So this is God's name. Now this is a really important thing. Who speaks Hebrew? Okay. Who speaks Hebrew? What? Who knows Hebrew grammar besides you? Okay. So in Hebrew, we have what's called a shoresh. Shoresh is the root of the verb. If this was a verb, the shoresh, the root of it would be the hey vav. Nachon? Right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
She said yes. She was like,
No, I'm not sure because I know that usually the shorts.
but in ancient Hebrew, there actually were two letters. But
That's what I was
yeah,
So
thinking.
you
even
know
so.
better than I.
Now, hey vav is the root of the word lehiyot, which means to be or to exist. Right? When you put a yud in front of a verb, it makes it
Future.
future what?
Oh God, I don't know.
Future what?
I didn't hear.
When you put a yud in front of the verb,
Shall be.
it becomes future, and what's sex? Masculine.
Masculine.
Okay. Because
Explain.
he yet abed, right? So it becomes future tense masculine,
That's right.
right? When you put a hey at the end of a word, it makes it past tense feminine,
Oh.
which means that our name for God is male and female, future, present, and past. It is all time in both sexes.
That's cool.
Isn't it?
Good.
Yes.
Uh,
I heard that.
so that gives you an idea when we talk God. So I'll often refer to God as he because I figure he's a big girl and she can take care of herself. But I just don't want to say he, it, he, she, it, they, we. Okay? But it's past, present, future in masculine and feminine sense. Now let's look a little bit more at God's name. Because God's name is a skeleton key that opens up all of Judaism. Okay? You will look at a page. There's a page that looks like this in your handout. Are there people zooming right now, Orlando? We've got them. They have the opportunity to download this, hopefully.
Sure.
Okay. So if we look at this, this is God's name. And we have something in Judaism called Gamatria. Right? Gamatria is understand the deeper level of a word by understanding its numerical value. And if the numerical value is similar to another word's numerical value, there's a sympatico. Right? And we attribute each letter in the Hebrew aleph bet to a different number. Aleph is 1, bet is 2, gimel is 3. It'd be like A is 1, B is 2, C is 3. You remember your Roman numerals with the I's and the X and the B, right? So what is this? It's a Roman soldier asking for 5 beers. So, right? So it's, remember all that? Okay. The numerical value of the word for God is Yud, which is 10. That should be a 10, not a 1, sorry. Hey, which is 5. Bob, which is 6. Hey, which is 5 for a total of, someone said it? 26. What can we learn from this? What is the Hebrew word for love? Does anyone know? Ahava. Very good. Ahava.
Said I'm done.
And my printing is horrible, but I don't know how many of you read handwriting. Ahava means love.
1, 5,
1, 5, bet,
2 ו5.
giving us the total of
That's 26.
13.
Isn't it one?
13 is the word of this comes to us.
Yeah.
And 5 is also
Yeah, that's.
13. But 13 is the word for love, right? So here, that means 2 loves equal God's name.
So you want to know how you understand God's name, how you experience it, when you can really experience your love for God and God's love. 13 plus 13 equals 26.
Yeah.
And we really understand what God's name is when we can really feel our love for God, 13, and God's love for us, 13.
Ah,
That equals the 26. The heart of all things is love. Okay. Does it make sense to everyone?
it's an mutuality.
So that's part of it. Now let's look at something else. Where do we find that?
So it's a mutuality.
That's how it's relationship. So there's this letter called Aleph. Looks like this. In fact, looks exactly like that. Okay. Its numerical value is 1.
Is there any pencil you open?
I'm sure we have some. I'm sure we have some.
So that you follow it.
Oh,
Yeah,
do
that. Oh, well,
No, he's got a bunch.
All right.
yes,
So
thank you.
So, this Hebrew letter of Aleph has the numerical value of 1, the first letter. Okay? And it is silent. So, if you have an Aleph that's right here, it makes no sound. It has that vowel, it goes ah. It has this vowel, it goes eh, things like that. Okay? So, it's silent. In ancient Hebrew, it is the only silent letter in actual Hebrew. In ancient Hebrew, the ayin was pronounced ayin. And why do we not say it? Because it's a pain in the neck to say Shema Allah. But the ayin actually is a guttural sound. It's ayin. It's the only real silent letter in the Hebrew alphabet. Is aleph. Yeah. In Sefer HaBahir, which is a text that's about 2,000 years old, it breaks apart what the letters mean. And the reason I'm doing this is I really want you to start thinking like rabbis, which means we look at things from many angles at the same time, and many levels at the same time. And that includes understanding the letters and how they correspond to numbers and to energies and to different things and how they relate to each other. There's so much wisdom hidden in the Hebrew language. Okay? So much. So this letter Aleph, in Sefer Bahir, it talks about that Aleph, which has a value of 1, is actually composed of a Vav. The Vav is just a straight line, right? And this is a Yud. It's composed of a Vav and 2 Yuds. Everyone see that? That's an Aleph. A very good one with my writing, but it's an Aleph. You all see that?
So it's 26.
So it is also, Yud is 10, and Vav is 6. It is 26. Why? Because we find the love of God, we find God's name, we understand it. In the silence. Which is why, what is the command that we are, what's the big command that we all say? Shema, listen. Okay? You see how everything is connected? This is what I want to start showing you. Okay? That's what we're going to spend a lot of time on. If you look at this syllabus, a lot of time is spent in the Tanakh, in the Bible, because what happens is we see a story and then we see it recapitulated in a different way and recapitulated again over and over. And we learn from that. We pick up patterns. Judaism is very much about seeing the patterns. That's why our sages are so wise. They could see and they understood the patterns. So, do you see now that we understand that God's name is understanding, experiencing love? God's name has to do with our inner silence, our ability to listen. Any questions so far?
No, who wrote the Sefer Bahir?
It's attributed to Nehemiah. Or not to Nehemiah, sorry, to one of the rabbis, son of Nehemiah. Sefer Yetzirah, which is the other great text, is attributed to Rabbi to Avram Avinu. Abraham. Bahir is the same time period, but I mean, I'll look it up. I'll bring it to you next week. Yes.
Rabbi, is it true? I've heard this story that.
If it's a story that your grandfather told you and his grandfather told him, it's true.
No. I read this in so-called history of Jews.
You gotta speak loudly so they can hear you. Does it sound funny out there?
That the beginning of synagogues began with the fall of the Second Temple.
Right.
The Roman.
Well, no.
It started before that.
It starts with the destruction of the first temple, but it really becomes of importance with the destruction of the second. There are other places outside after the destruction of the first temple, but synagogue life becomes after the second temple. So all synagogues are actually modeled after the second temple, which is modeled after the first temple, which is modeled after the Holy Tabernacle we've been discussing for the last number of weeks in Torah portions. So you can actually trace it back. So now let's take a look at Torah. So in the Torah, in the very beginning of the book of Genesis, which is a horrible name for it, but that's not the name. The name of the book is Bereshit, the first word of the Torah portion. And it's usually translated as in the beginning. Totally horrible translation. But to really study, that's what we study, because to understand means to explore, to turn over. So what is Bereshit? Well, we know it has something to do with Rosh, with the beginning. But Bereshit is not a proper word. You will see it nowhere else in the Torah. It is improper Hebrew grammar. It's like saying supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Now you know that supercalifragilisticexpialidocious is an adjective describing something. You know that it's describing something big or great, right? The supercalifragilistic. Okay. So we know it's something. What is it? Well, first of all, why does it start with the bet, which is the second letter? Why does it not start with an aleph? Okay. Yeah. And the Torah is the word of God. This word is not a real meaning, though. Reshit does not mean beginning. It does now, but it's not a real word. It's not proper Hebrew grammar. So why does it have? What's the last word of the Torah? Does anyone know? Israel. So the last letter. So the last letter. Actually, let me fix it. The last. It's there never arose another one like Pharaoh or like Moses who knew God face to face and all this. So it ends up with Israel, right? And every Simchas Torah, we read the last paragraph, we read the first paragraph, and we say that we tag the last letter of the Torah Lamed and the first letter of the Torah Bet. It spells the word Lev, which means heart. And the Torah ties together our heart, and the heart ties together our Torah. That's very true. But there's more than this. Let's look at this word, because again, it's not proper grammar. So if you take these words, these letters, and you play anagrams, who plays anagrams? Anyone else play anagrams or Scrabble? Okay. Anagrams, you kind of take letters and make them into new words. You can take this word Bereshit, and it spells the phrase Shirat Av, which means Shirat Av. Yes, Aleph, yeah. Which means
is a singing of
this is the song of the Father. Okay? That God creates the universe. Music. Universe with music. But with music. First of all. It's all created with the 22 letters. Okay, which, by the way, each of the letters correspond to a different note of the musical scale. Each of the letters correspond to a different constellation. That's what Jewish astrology is based on, which is talked about in the Talmud as well as other texts like that here. But it's Shirat Av, the idea that it's music. Let's look at this one. I want you to just remember that there's a Lamed, and imagine that there's an aleph hidden. It's silent.
So first, the music, then the letter? Which one came?
You just put things in a linear fashion of time.
Right,
There's no linear fashion, right? Okay. Because remember, it's good, hey, it's okay, go. So imagine that the aleph does exist there. It's silent. It's hidden right before the. In other words, it's a silent place in the middle of the letter. It's a silent place in your heart. Everyone follow me when I said that? Yes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, this is a map on how to create and manifest in this physical world. Because even though this world doesn't make sense, you want to see the word, you'll see it on your handouts on the next one of the pages. Maybe the page before. Page before. You'll see it looks like this. And it's got the letters, names in English above each letter. Remember, we read from right to left. That's not backwards. That's just so if you take the first three letters of the word, well, actually, first, if you take the first, the second to last, and the last, it spells beit or bait, which means home, also means container. Ancient Hebrew, beit is also something that contains. Okay? Well, so one there and there. Okay? If you take the first, the second, and the third, right? It spells the word bara, which means create, the verb form.
Actually, there is no real translation for Baha.
If you look at it that way, but we think of it as bara, we think of bria as the world of creation.
No, Yetzirah is a
It's formation.
Baha, it's yet.
So in English, we think of Yetzirah as formation, bria as creation, and atzilut as emanation. Okay, when we get to Jewish mysticism, we're going to get to that when we get to Maseh Bereshit, creation of the wilderness. But if you take these three letters, it spells the word bara, meaning to create. If you take the second, the third, and the fourth letter, it spells the word rosh, which means head or intellect. Okay, with your head. If you take the third and the fourth letters, it spells the word esh, which means fire. And what is fire? Fire is passion. If you take the third, the fourth, and the fifth letters, it spells the word ishi, which means my human being. If you take the last letter, it's T, which is the tuf, which is the last letter of the aleph base, and it stands for Torah, which actually means guidelines. Okay? Just like we think of halacha as saying law, it's not. Halacha means a way of going. It comes from the root lalechet, to go. So halacha is actually a way of going. Now, God gives us just in this first line, long commentaries about just this first line. A group of rabbis and I, we spent 6 months on just the first 3 lines of Genesis separation. Okay, once a week for 2 hours. Looking at different commentaries on things. So what does it say to do? This is how you create. First of all, remember, before all of it is the silent spot inside your heart. With me? So how do you manifest something? You go to the silent spot inside your heart, and you create the container, the framework for what you want. You create with your intellect and your passion that which you are creating, and then you give it guidelines with which to exist. In other words, I want to create a piece of music. Because I've gone in the silent piece place in my heart, I want to create a piece of music. I decide, okay, it's going to be a symphony, it's going to be a string quartet, it's going to be a song. I create it with both my intellect, my mind, and I create it with my passion. Once it's created, it's now got its own guidelines to live by. It's in this key, in this rhythm, in this pace. I want to create a piece of art. I go in the silent part of my heart. I want to create a sculpture. That's a scary thing for me to create. I'm not, visual arts are not my forte, per se. But so I go and I want to create a sculpture. I realize I'm going to be doing a sculpture, not a painting. I create it with my intellect and my passion. I want it to be Jewish oriented, and I want it specifically to be a sculpture that honors our sages. I then create it, and we know where it's going to go. I'm going to put it there on the wall, whatever. Doesn't matter what it is. This model of creation works, doesn't it? How do you see that? Yes? All make sense?
Very much.
That's all hidden in the first word. Just right there. But instead, we read the English, we say, in the beginning, God created heaven. Let's take a look at what it says here. Who wants to? Alan, would you read the first couple of lines of Galatians?
It says, yes, in the beginning of God's creation.
Slowly.
In the beginning,
So, in the beginning, when it began, before it began, when it all started, when we had this process, in the beginning,
the heavens and the earth.
God created the heavens and the earth. What is the word for heavens? Shemayim. Shemayim ba'aretz. Now, Shemayim, I'll do this in English just because it's going to make my life a little easier. Excuse me. Sorry. Always recreate the chart, and you guys have it there as well. Oh, where is it? So, Shemayim, I'm going to do it in English. Shemayim is the word for heavens. All All right, so I'm moving on. All right, Shemayim is the words for heavens. Shemayim, our sages teach us, is composed of two words, Esh and Mayim. Right? Esh means fire. And Mayim, water. So read it not as God created the heavens and the earth, but rather God created fire and water and land.
Huh.
Or more specifically, fire is just gas. Not that kind of gas. Cut that out. God, and you know, that gas is cheaper than the gas at the pump anyhow, right? So God creates gas, liquid, and solid. Right? Shemayim v'aretz. You guys all see how Shemayim became fire? Okay. The word Shemayim means heavens. The word, our sages teach the word Shemayim is composed of the word Esh and Mayim.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Esh is fire, Mayim is water. All fire is gas, right? Mayim is water, Aretz is land. Okay, so in the beginning, God created those three kind of elements. Go on.
When the earth was astonishingly empty, with darkness upon the surface of the deep, and the divine presence hovered upon the surface of the water.
Okay, go on.
God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. God saw that the light was good. And God separated between the light and the darkness. God called the light day, and to the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning one day.
Okay. We have all heard that English translation, yes?
Yeah.
And we would probably even, if we grew up, I don't know how they teach it, you know, one of the things I've learned is that many people from Israel, that they don't necessarily explore the text, they just read it. Let's look at this in a different way. Let's read it a little bit. Bereshit bara Elohim. In the beginning, when God did all that manifestation thing, Elohim, bara Elohim, God created, et Shemayim et haaretz, the gas, liquid, and substance. Okay? I really should bring my
We separate. What if you just say Bereshit with the title? Instead of calling it Torah, it should be called Bereshit, and then start the first word.
Because it doesn't start that way. There's no title pages in Torah.
Well, but maybe that would be the title, and then try to reinterpret the first few words.
Then you could do that, but that's not what it's written. It's not a title. We don't have a title page that says Shemot, Vayikra, Bamidbar, Barim.
They got mixed up somewhere.
So in the beginning, God created the gas and the liquid and the land. Haaretz tohu v'vohu, and all of the substance was chaos and confusion. Vohu. Okay. And there was a darkness on the face of the depths. Fair translation? Okay, so there's basically chaos and confusion and this everything going on but nothing going on. Now, what does it say? Baruch Elohim, and the Spirit of God, merachefet. What's merachefet mean in modern Hebrew? Move quickly. And merachefet is also a slang word that's used for something else, isn't it? Right? Uh-huh. Just so you know, merachefet is also the speedy starting of a spark from bada bing, bada boom. True. That's how it's used in modern. She's blushing, so you know that. You go quickly. Okay? So the Spirit of Elohim goes very quickly on the face of the waters. V'yomer Elohim, and God said, ye or there will be light, and there was light. With me so far. Just think about it. So you've got this chaos and confusion of gas, liquid, and solid. And the Spirit of God moves very quickly to make a spark, and now there's light. To me, that sounds like the Big Bang.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Doesn't that sound like the Big Bang?
Yeah, it's amazing. Never mind.
Just so you know, Rabbi Isaac of Akko, Isaac the Blind in the 10th century, calculates the age of the universe based upon 1970s MIT calculated the age of the universe. They have less than, I think, 2% difference out of the billions of years. That's within a margin of error. Who's to say they're right if he's wrong?
Right.
And he did it 1,000 years ago, and you can Wikipedia him. It's wonderful. Okay, So God said there will be light, and there was light. Yireh Elohim et haor. Yare, what does that really mean? It's great that people speak Hebrew. Yare. Perceive. Just to see.
Okay.
Okay, to see. Perceive. So God perceived, now listen carefully. God perceived et haor. With me so far? Listen to the next phrase. Kito. Now we've taught that it says that God perceived the light, God saw the light, and it was good. What does ki mean? Because. It doesn't say in the Hebrew. It does not say God saw the light and it was good. It says God saw the light because it was good. That's what it says. Look, I'm not smart to make this up. It says because it was good. Okay? The Abdel Elohim, and so God separates. The first act that God does in the physical world is separate the holiness of one thing. That's why Ma'ariv Aravim, that prayer is so important. It's the separation of the holiness of one thing from the holiness of another. So God perceives the light because it's good, and he separates between the light and the darkness. Everyone following this translation? For how many of you is this a new translation? Not so much, because you guys study the Hebrew. So it makes sense to you. We study, that's not how you guys learn in English. It's not.
No, Hebrew school, we never thought that.
Now check this out. Vayikra Elohim, which means, I'm going to look at the people who speak Hebrew. Vayikra Elohim means
God says.
And God-
He cried out or something.
God called. Okay? When you put a lamed in front of a word, what does it mean in Hebrew?
Two.
So it says here, Vayikra Elohim leor. God called to the light. Yom. So God perceives it because it is good. He separates it, and then he calls to the light. Day! And to the darkness, he calls night.
So he's personified them or named them.
He names them. And now you understand why this is so important. What else? Go on, follow that thought. Go on, follow through.
Because he's before.
Names, say it loudly.
Name has meaning and name is important.
Names have meaning, they're important, they're powerful. Right. And it's why the names are so powerful. You know the traditional way that you find your child's name is that the father dreams with the baby when the baby is in the womb and listens to what the neshama of the baby says. Some of you have heard the story. So we knew which I had done that for months. My boys were awesome. I sang to them all the time, talked to them, I dreamed with them, meditated. And we knew that it was going to be Jonathan Joseph and Benjamin George. And we knew that Benjamin George was going to be Benjamin Shoshan after my grandma. It was Shoshan. And that Jonathan was going to be Yonatan Yosef. Jonathan gets home. First few days. Jonathan Joseph laughs, and I say, Yonatan. And he goes, Yonatan. This grumpy old man. So after about 2 days of this, and I'm going nuts because it's Jonathan's his English name. He's laughing at that. When I say Yonatan, he's like, so I ask, a lark, I think, okay, another variation of Jonathan in Hebrew would be Yochanan. But they're two very different characters. Yonatan is David's best friend. Yochanan is Yochanan ben Zakkai, which was the Talmudic teacher. And so on a lark, I said, Yochanan? He goes, hee. Yonatan.
No, wow.
Yochanan? Hee. Yonatan. I was like, come look at this. He knew his name. Names have power. When Jacob changes his name to Israel, there is meaning. And when we are called Bnei Yaakov, the children of Jacob, and sometimes we're called Bnei Israel, and there's a reason, children of Israel, and there's a reason. I'm sorry.
Jacob changed his name from Yaakov to Israel.
Right.
God changed his name.
God changes, the angel changes his name.
So,
I will not let go of you unless you give me a new name. And he says, your name will now be Israel because you've wrestled and triumphed over Babylon.
so it's allowed to let go of an old name and
We do naming ceremonies, of
So
course we
maybe
do.
this day doesn't have Naomi.
Of course we do.
No, there is a reason why I'm asking, but that's.
And not only is it allowed, I'll do a step better than that.
Naomi, what's the name of
Okay.
Ruth?
Bruce.
A step better than
Yeah,
allowed.
here it's.
One of the things we do
Yeah,
if someone,
that's so
I don't know the history of this, but it goes back at least 700, 800 years. But there's a tradition in Judaism that God forbid someone is very sick, we give them a new name. So that the angel of death doesn't find them.
And that's actually true. My father was saying-
Tell them. You guys listen. Let's say
No,
this
my
loudly.
name is Naomi.
I
but
Wait, wait,
I will tell the story, but I have one question before. So, because I've learned about names, but there are people who hold the view that you can never, the energy of the name you were born with, you can never get rid of.
Totally not true. You can get rid of anything. Take a mitzvah.
No, the energy, like the.
You can get rid of anything. Take a mitzvah.
No, I hear that, but that's for private conversation, because, okay.
You can do
Someone in
anything.
Israel, there is someone in Israel who specializes in names.
And we have
yeah,
thousands of
people-
years of specializing in names.
Okay, so I want.
Just some people in Israel might charge for it.
No,
We're here.
Apropos, just the story I wanted to share. So when my dad was, I can't remember how old, but I've seen before he was 1 years old. He got very, very sick, and they didn't think he's going to live, and they changed his name, and they gave him the name Emmanuel. God is with us. And right after, like few days after.
We absolutely look. Parents don't always listen. They don't listen to the kids. What do you want? I could have kept John's Hebrew name as Yonatan, and he could have gone through his life. Every time I said Yonatan, going, right? Yeah, now he's
so
doing
much of him.
Instead, it's Yochanan. And
He just hated when
it
he
has
got
the
the
piece.
Americans.
Okay, all right. So that's just right here in the beginning when we talk about this creation. Do you see how much depth there is in just the first line? It's not there. As Rashi says, we'll study him as well. He's a great theologian and great rabbi and teacher. From the Middle Ages, Rashi said the word Bereshit begs to be interpreted. That's what he actually says. It begs to be interpreted. So we have this concept, and we have the 6 days. Now, on here you have a reading list. Hopefully you will start just reading the text because you have it. You'll have enough and you can start reading. This is not the whole Bible. This is just some highlights to be able to study and start seeing passages. Now, I want to get to this idea of the Garden of Eden. So we have 6 days, the 7th day God rests, right? Man's been created. Hashem, God, planted a garden in Eden, the eastern place for the man whom he had formed. Yeah. And Hashem, God, caused to sprout from the ground every tree that was pleasing to the sight and good for food. Also the tree of life in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and bad. Okay. And it goes on. And God took the man and placed him in the garden to work it and to garden. And God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of knowledge of good and bad you must not eat thereof, for on the day of it you shall surely die. And God said, Hashem God said, it is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helper corresponding to him. Hashem God formed out of the ground every beast of the field and every bird of the sky, brought them to the man to see what he would call each one. And whatever the man called each living creature, that remained his name, and it is today. And there's again the power of the name.
But there's man naming, not God.
That's right. But you know what? What's your full name?
Aviva Elta,
Were you raised in Hebrew or English?
English.
What's your full name in English?
Amy Elizabeth.
And when your mom alive when you were growing up?
Oh, yeah.
And there was one thing when she said, hey, Ames.
Oh, I'll tell you that story. So my son's Jonathan Popowitz. So he won't go by it anymore because only when I was mad would I call him by his full name.
Right?
So he's
Amy
Johnny.
Elizabeth, you knew you were in trouble.
That's it. Johnny Popowitz. Johnny is
Right.
now his name.
I'll call my son John. I'll call him John, whatever I'll call him. But when he knows if I say Yochanan Yosef, he's in trouble.
Yeah.
Right?
Down here now.
He knows exactly, right? So that names all this. So Hashem God cast a deep, but as for man, he did not find a helper corresponding to him. So Hashem God cast a deep sleep upon the man, and he slept. And he took one of his sides and he filled it with flesh in its place. Then Hashem God fashioned the side that he had taken from the man into a woman. He brought her to the man. The man said, "This is the bone of bones, flesh of my flesh. This shall be called woman, for from man was she taken. Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and cling to him, his wife, and they shall become one flesh." Now, in the other story of when man is created, it says, which is just a chapter later, it says that, where is it? It will have a comment and it will say, "In our image we created them." This is the 6th day chapter. It says here, "And God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness. They shall rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and over the animals, the whole earth, and every creeping thing that crept upon the earth." Listen to this line. So God created the man in his image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them.
בצלם אלוהים ברא אותם.
But how is it male and female? So he goes from him to them. I think I've done this with you two before for some reason. Can I borrow you up, please? So our sages have a great explanation. Our sages have a great explanation. First of all, until Eve is separated from Adam, that being is called Ha-Adam. Now, Ha is a prefix in Hebrew that means the. If the table is a shulchan, the table is Ha-Shulchan. If this is a book, a sefer is the word for book, Ha-Sefer means the book, right? So there's this creation called Ha-Adam. But once Adam and Eve are split, you never call them Ha-Adam anymore. It's always Adam and Chava. So this is what we're taught. Let's come back to each other, back to back. I feel like I've done this.
You have done this.
Okay.
Interesting that you just read the word side, his side, rather than rib. Why is
Right.
it?
Because
Can
that's
you
what it says.
explain that?
That's what it says.
Why everybody thinks it's a rib?
Because it's the side of right here. So this is Ha-Adam. This is the human being. Male on this side, female on this side. We also call it Adam Chadmon. But this is Ha-Adam, the human being. Male and female, we have created them. The human being, him. No, there's no transgender.
I'm just saying other than.
No, that
I'm working on it.
It's not a sexuality issue. Okay. And where are they connected? They're connected in the back at the side ribs, right? That's it. This is Adam. But man, they better after all these years of marriage. But you can get close to your wife. It's okay. You're married. Okay. And so God puts them to sleep. Sleep. Thank you. God separates them, turns them around, and now you have Adam and Chava. Adam and Eve. Okay.
Oh.
Excuse me, see it. That just explained this whole concept of going from singular to plural back to singular, didn't it? All right, everyone with me again still? So now, here's what happens though. Here's what's happened in history. Okay? In history, in Christianity, is God male or female? Male. God's male. Jesus is male, but then God's male. And it's a great statement, you know. You came from a man's rib, therefore you should be subservient to men. And I said that to an Israeli and I didn't get hit already.
Submissive.
Control.
Submissive.
Oh my gosh.
See, I'm not going to get hit. I don't like Carol.
Submissive.
So the idea is, what's happened in Christian theology for 2,000 years is Eve came from Adam's rib, therefore women came second, and they should subservient to men. And that is an argument that's gone on. That's been a philosophy for thousands of years.
5,700.
Well, no, the 2,000 from the Christians. We don't have that. But in this case, you both came from Adam and Eve, right?
But we do have that. We perpetuate that.
Speak for yourself, I don't perpetuate
I
that.
don't mean we in this room, but I mean.
Everyone else outside the room.
Well, I just, orthodoxy perpetuates this idea.
No,
But
okay,
I'm obligated as a man. A woman
no,
is
no,
not
no, no,
obligated.
no, 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 I'm gonna put a rest to that right now for just a moment, we'll come back. How many of you heard that Orthodox Judaism believes a woman should, how many of you believe that Orthodox Judaism, that a woman says a woman should walk behind a man, that that's Orthodox belief? No, I didn't say that we believe it, that that's what Orthodox Jews believe.
No,
No, I don't think they mean it.
They don't.
I don't
They
think they
don't.
believe that either. I think they've assigned men certain obations they haven't assigned women, and that's taken on the same.
So.
I don't know if that's right.
In the
but that's-
Talmud, it says that a woman should not walk in front of a man. It does say that. Okay? And it goes on, because the man's gonna be looking at what he shouldn't be looking at. And it's true. So you know my wife, if she's walking in front of me, I'm not thinking of Torah. I'm thinking of godliness, but it's not exactly Torah. Okay? I'm thinking of her cultus. Right? Especially if she's wearing high heels. She's my wife, I'm entitled to do that. We can all agree I got the best looking rabbits in
She absolutely.
So, right, so it says why. That doesn't mean she needs to walk behind me, we walk side by side. A woman is only obligated to do 3 things. Man is obligated to do the rest. It does not prohibit a woman from doing this. So I will tell you a story, and then I want to keep going with the Torah lesson, because when we get up to that time period, we'll get there. A number of years ago, I was asked to be a keynote speaker at a rally for Israel at the federal building. And there are all these young Chabad guys, rabbis, rapping to film. Maybe they had underarm hair, and maybe they didn't. Okay, they were that young, right? And so one of my former students from LMU, who's Persian, says, "Hey, Rabbi, can you rap the film with me?" I said, "Not mine, but his." Of course I will if he says it. So he goes and he says, "My rabbi's here. This is my card." Of course you can come up. So I rap to phone. His name's also John. We go back, and his mother is one of those really tough Persian women. I love her. I do. I truly love her. But she's one of those Persian women who she can start a fight, she will. And she's past the age of menstruation. It's not an issue of her menstruation. She goes, "Rabbi, I want to rap the film." "Rabbi, I want to rap the film right now." "Not my film." Go to this young man. I say, "She would like to rap the film. Are you okay if I rap the film with her?" Now, if he had had any sechel, any wisdom, he would have said, "I'm not comfortable with that," end of conversation. Right? He could have said that, and I would be done.
I would be very uncomfortable.
This Shmendrik says it's forbidden. And I said, "Really? I don't claim to know every word of the Torah. I don't claim to know every word of the Talmud. Where's it forbidden?" So it's forbidden. It's against the law. I said, "What's your source?" He says, "Well, my rabbi told me it's forbidden." I said, "Okay, did you ever ask him his source? Because when I say something, I'll find the source for people." He says, "No, but I know it's forbidden. The rabbi said so." I said, "Here, you got my card. I'll make you a deal. Your rabbi tells you where women are forbidden from rapping to film when they're not on their menstrual cycle. And I will buy both you and his family's dinner at Katz." It's very expensive. I never got a phone call.
Yeah, because it's ingrained, even though it's not written. That's.
It's wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. You know the book Rashi's Daughters, and I know the author. There's a whole book called Rashi's Daughters. And yeah, no, the author. And there's a whole theory that Rashi did not write Rashi as 3 daughters. There's a whole theory about that. So, and about women reading Torah publicly, there's a discussion in the Talmud about what a woman can wear when she reads the Torah publicly. Because if she's not wearing anything under a cap, she doesn't veil, none of the men are going to be paying attention to the Torah. Right? Just like there's a discussion what the high priest can wear when he bends over, right? Why is there that discussion in the Talmud unless women are reading Torah publicly? Otherwise, why would they have the discussion? Right? Look, I'm just telling you what the text says. You know, that's my job to kind of help with that. Now, I want to look at one other thing. Now, the serpent. The serpent. The serpent was cunning beyond any beast of the field that God had made. And he said to the woman,
did perhaps God say, you shall not eat of any tree of the garden? One said to the serpent, fruit of any tree of the garden we may eat. Of the fruit of the tree which is in the center of the garden, God has said, you shall neither eat it nor touch it, lest you die. The serpent said to the woman, you will surely not die, for God knows that on the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, you will be like God, knowing good and bad. And the woman perceived that the tree was good for eating, it was a delight to the eyes. Okay, so we all know the story, right? The serpent says, hey,
Yeah.
go eat the fruit. It's okay. She eats the fruit. She says to Adam, hey, Adam, eat the fruit. He eats it. And why? Let's look at something again. Every word. Let's go back to what God says. God says in chapter 2, verse 14, he says to the man, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you must not eat thereof. On the day that you eat, you shall surely die. Everyone follow that? When the serpent confronts Eve, what's Eve's response? Of the fruit of any tree we may eat. She says, of the fruit of any tree in the garden we may eat. This is what God says. And of the fruit of the tree which is in the center of the garden, God has said, you shall neither eat it nor touch it, lest you die. Wait a minute.
That's not.
What did God say? Don't eat it.
Yeah.
What's Eve saying?
Yeah.
Or
Touch it.
touch it. So wait a minute. God says to Adam, don't eat it. Somehow Eve is saying, I'm not allowed to touch it.
Telecom.
You know how he got that.
So our teaching is, well, she gets it from Adam, obviously.
So it's right, so he missed.
So often we try and be overprotective. So here's the story. Can I write it again? Actually, let me percent. This up too. So you get to be Eve. I'll be the Nachash. Which I think, the Kiddush cup we use, have you ever looked at the Kiddush cup that I have, the sister who got for the rabbi to use? So the one for the cantor has all these beautiful flowers. I think it's in theory supposed to be a grapevine for the rabbi, but it looks like a snake. That's all I know is that they gave me a snake Kiddush cup. Okay, here's the tree. Come stand by the tree. Mr. Snake comes up and says, hey, what God say you can't eat it? And she replies, God said I can't eat it or touch it. So the snake goes like this. Oh, look, you touched it and you didn't die. You might as well eat it. That's the midrash. So Adam, trying to be overprotective, thank you, overprotective of Eve, ends up screwing them both up, doesn't he?
Right.
She's like, I don't know.
All
All right, now what? All right, so this is all a setup, isn't it? Do you see that?
Oh, what is it? I never heard of it.
It's midrash, it's not me. I'm not that smart. So this happens. So what happens? They hear God manifesting itself, the Son of God, and the man and his wife, they hide, and God comes out. I heard the sound in the garden, but you're naked. And God says, have you eaten of the fruit which I commanded you not to eat? Now, what does the man say? What should the man say, first of all? Man should say, yes, I messed up. What does the man say?
It's not really.
The woman who you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree and I ate. It's her fault. It's her fault,
It's exactly.
right? Her fault. Instead of taking it to, first of all, God's all knowing. You don't think God knows who ate the fruit and how it all happened? Of course God does. So why is God asking? Because we all have two parts. We all have the inclination, the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer HaTov. The Yetzer HaTov, the inclination to do good, the Yetzer Hara, the inclination to not do good. And God knows, but it's like when you walk into the kitchen and your child has chocolate chips on his mouth and cookie crumbs on his shirt, and the cookie jar is on the ground, and you say, who broke the cookie jar? It's not because you don't know, it's because you want him to have the responsibility to stand up and have the relationship. So God's saying the same thing. Who told you this? The man, instead of having any,
Husband, you got.
I read another word,
Yeah.
Beitzim, cojones, right?
Right.
Instead of that,
Huevos.
huevos. Instead of
They
standing,
don't.
what do you mean they don't?
They don't, the men don't.
Some of us do. All the men in here do.
Most of you guys, maybe you have.
Oh, don't.
You have to take responsibility
Wait.
from the beginning
Yeah,
of time.
And then what happens? He screws up and they're out of eating. So there's a little bit of there's a repercussion. So what does he say? He says to the woman, and he says to God, she made me do it.
It's always
That's
their
all
fault.
right.
It's
Wait,
always
wait,
their
wait.
fault.
Wait.
You too, I don't know the man.
Wait. And Hashem, God said to the woman,
That's true.
wait. You think he's the one who doesn't have responsibility? And God said to the woman, what is it that you've done? And the woman said, the serpent made me do it. What should she have said? She blames the serpent, no different than the man. Okay?
No, no difference.
Yes, it's not, in both cases, God, in both cases, God, they have an opportunity to step up and have a good relationship that's honest. And look, they're both like this now. And in both cases, and in both
It is air
cases,
conditioning here.
Yeah,
we can turn it off. I just run so hot, that's why I asked him. No, when I teach, I run.
What did the serpent say?
So he doesn't even ask the serpent because he knows what happened. So he goes to the serpent and says, because you've done this, you're going to have to crawl in the field. Okay? But let's take a look at what's really going on here. It's an opportunity for them to develop their relationship from a childlike relationship with God to a deeper relationship of responsibility. And they blow it.
They didn't have any guidance.
So who set the whole thing up?
God did.
That's our growth. This is what we've come here
It's
to
our growth.
achieve.
It's our growth. Okay? We're making a little, right? So they go up. And then we have this other story of Cain and Abel.
Yeah.
But it's so important to understand that God is part and parcel of this. Looking for verse. And that no one's taking responsibility. Right? No one's taking any responsibility. So,
But Robbie, I have a question.
yes.
What would have happened?
You're gonna ask me what would happen if God was different. Okay, go ahead.
No, that's not the point. If one of the two, if Adam or Eve, had taken responsibility.
It would have been a very different place.
We would have been in heaven.
It would have been
I don't know.
Maybe we would
Yeah,
have
there
finished
you
our
go.
Tikkun.
What would have been?
Maybe it wouldn't have lived. Remember, there's a midrash teaching that when God wanted to create human beings, angels said no because it just would mess things up. Because we have free will. The reason that we put our feet together during the Amidah prayer is because, and we'll learn how to do this, the prayers preceding the Amidah have hopefully taken us through the world of Asiyah, the physical world, the world of the Yetzirah that has a little bit more formation, a little spirituality, the world of Bria that has a little bit more, to the world of Atzilut, where we are now outside of our physical bodies. And like the angels, we only have one leg because we know what our purpose is, we know how to do this. And so we do not pray the Amidah prays us. So the phrase in a nice of a type that Yagid, sorry. Yagid, so we can't write it, I apologize. When it says, it doesn't mean, I don't know, I open up my lips to my mouth, made it clear, your praise. That's not what it means. It's Yagid. Open up my lips. And this is a form of Hebrew grammar called binyan hihil, which is causative. So the reason we say, when we light candles, we say lahad lik ner shel Shabbat. Lahad, it doesn't mean I'm lighting the candle. I'm not going like this and making the fire. I'm causing the fire to be lit.
Oh.
That's actually the kind of grammar. This grammar is very important in Hebrew to understand people. So does that make sense to you guys who speak Hebrew?
Yes.
Okay, so it's yagid, it's a causative, and the idea is cause me to praise you. I am so empty. And now your prayers are going to come through my mouth, and I'm going to hear what you want me to say. That's why we stand with one leg during the Amidah. The angels have one leg, they know what they're supposed to do, they know how to do it. We have two. We can do all sorts of good things and not good things. We have free will. And the angels say, don't make God, he's going to mess things up. But every time we do something good, it means that it has that much more value. We don't have to. We could have done something better than that. Every time we do something good, it has value. If I had to do good, what value is it? Okay?
Yeah.
I've taught my children since they were born, basically. if someone asks you for charity, you give. Period. Because that person has put themselves in a place in life where they're giving me the opportunity to do a good deed, and I don't want to miss that. So I was talking about my father, God rest his soul, but not much. And one of them in particular, both of them, but especially one of them, we'll be driving down the street, and there'll be a homeless guy with a sign, and he'll say, "Daddy, a guy with a sign," and I got to make 3 left-hand turns to get to the guy, to give him $1.
Hmm.
And it's worth every moment of it, because he's choosing to do the good. I don't want to discourage him. Also, I had a long talk about this years ago. She said, "People, lots of people scam artists." I said, "I don't care. Commandments to give to charity, not to judge them. What they do with it is their challenge, not mine. I want them to know always give when asked." So if I have to make 3 left-hand turns, so my child gets the opportunity to do the good deed, I'm going to. Right? When a child, how many of you are parents? So when your child has the opportunity to do not good and chooses to do good, it's beautiful.
So proud of you.
It's so much nothing, right? So much more than when you tell them you got to do this.
Yeah.
Okay? It gives me so much more joy when one of my boys offers it to do something for his brother as opposed to me telling him to do it, right? That's the joy we give God. Because when we make the right choice, it makes a difference. When Angel makes the right choice, he doesn't have a choice. He's doing what he does. That's what he has in life. But when we make the choice, it has value. And so we are actually in partnership with God. And this is one of the Jewish concepts. We need God. Do you know what else?
God needs us.
God needs us.
Why?
Because we're in partnership.
But God doesn't have human qualities. We
Yes.
attribute it to him.
We speak of God in anthropomorphic terms. But God needs us. God creates us. So that he too, because let's think about this one. Let's think of the election.
Boring only having angels.
Let's think of this. If you are infinite, and our minds can't really grasp this, right? So here it goes a little bit. But if God is infinite, that means God is always growing, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm,
By definition,
mhm.
right? Because if God stops growing, it's fine, right? How does God grow?
Bravo.
Through relationship. Through the relationship. It's a beautiful story. I tell it all the time. I love this story. That a little girl goes to her grandfather. He says, "Little one, what are you crying about?" She's crying. She goes, "We were playing hide and seek, and no one came to look for me." And the grandpa, with a tear in his eyes, says, "No, you're not that."
So can I suggest an interpretation that my intellect probably would accept more? So there is emphasis in the Torah about chesed and mitzvot,
Chesed is compassion.
or act of kindness and all. So,
Well, that's different. You look Chassidim is different than Chesed, but yes.
okay. So,
They're based on the Chesed, which is the same quality, but there's different manifestation of it. Acts of loving kindness and compassion are 2 different things. Like values and ethics are 2 different things in English. Chesed is a quality. It manifests in the actions of giving with Chassidim. Okay? Make sense? Okay.
so if God is, and I think I like to refer to God as the it.
Okay.
If God doesn't have human quality, it's an infinite energy or whatever it is, and you can't comprehend. Perhaps a way to look at it is by, and that's something that just came to my mind, by the mitzvot that we keep, and mitzvot, I mean everything, chesed and everything. Probably we generate something that causes something up there that creates that expansion or relationship.
So, yes, and more.
Okay.
Okay? I'll tell another story.
Mhm.
Okay? It's all the time. 10-year-old boy is brilliant. I don't know how many times I've heard this. 10-year-old boy is brilliant. They send him to college. So the college kids make fun of him. They say, "We'll give you $1 if you can tell me where God is." He says, "I'll give you $10 if you can tell me where God isn't." The moment we say that we affect something outside of us, we have put a limit to God. But our relationship expands everything. We are both inside the circle of God and part of the circle. So we say, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Rabbi Stan Levy actually has a great line. He says it means Shema Yisrael, listen, you people who wrestle with God. Hashem, the God you know in your heart. Elokeinu, the God you see in the trees. Hashem Echad, these are one and the same. To appreciate divinity in every moment, joyous and painful. To appreciate and experience. As we grow, if God is infinite and we are part of God, God is also expanding. If I go work out my biceps, I go to a gym and I work out. And I want to show Ellen, I did have a muscle once. It got lonely, it left me. It's me to shave a little bit. So I go work out my biceps, right? Work out my right bicep only. This bicep is now affected. My whole body is affected, including my left toe. Right? Because my whole body is affected. But my left toe, if you had gave it to a consciousness, would be unaware of my bicep, wouldn't it? Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, no, yes, I was just thinking, I've got so many questions, but I don't want to.
It's okay, that's what, so we're in no rush. No rush.
I had
So-
a question.
Go, shoot.
But it's kind of a small question.
Is there, I didn't know there was such a thing.
Well, after that question, this is much smaller. But I was just sort of captivated by good when God names light good. And then
He
good and
perceives
evil,
it because it is good.
because it is good, and how that relates to seeing good and evil and the truth.
Sin beckons at the doorway, crashing you to enter. The Jewish version of evil. Who saw a movie called Devil's Advocate? Keanu Reeves. That is the Jewish definition of evil.
Yeah.
Not the idea of Satan or Lucifer being, but because he has this great line where he says, "Hey, I didn't make you do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just showed it to you. You chose it, baby. I got nothing to do with it. Yeah, you showed up. You saw her. She looked good. You went there. Not my fault." Right? Yeah, it's a great movie in terms of theology. So, good and evil are relative because, in fact, you can't have one without the other. We don't have, and someone once said that the better term for Tov and Ra, as opposed to good and evil, is sufficient and insufficient.
So light is there a
Sufficient.
balance to light is sufficient and darkness is insufficient?
But they're both part of the same thing. So the great thing about this world is we get to experience life in all its magnificence. I have two of the most powerful weekends in my life. Friday morning bris, Friday night Shabbat, Saturday morning bar mitzvah, Saturday night wedding, Sunday. Exhausting.
Yeah.
My backwards thinking of it because it was so painful. But you know what? Both times. And both times it was in order. Amazing. Yesterday, this couple had flown in from England with conversion on Friday. Sunday yesterday we did the wedding. 12 people in Melbourne. A week ago Sunday I was burying a suicide. I was burying a suicide of a man who killed himself with a 13-year-old daughter.
Right.
Yeah. I get to be there in the real moments. That's why it's such a blessing. It really is. And most people don't. They kind of go through life and okay, I do this and I do that and I sell my real estate and I sell my art and it's a blessing to see life, to experience life. And the pains I don't want to have, God forbid, all the joys, to be able to, this is what God gives us by putting us out in the world. And that's so beautiful. If you really think about it, that's really, really rich. It's really beautiful. But we ignore it so often. How many stars are in the sky? How many trees are around us? Do we ever pay attention? It's Midrash that the bush that was burning but was not consumed that Moses saw had been burning and was not consumed since the first day of creation, the third day of creation. Moses was the first one who bothered noticing. That's all. And we need to notice, and we need to listen, and we need to be there with people. And we all have something. Maybe this is a good concept to end the evening on before we study more next week. We all have something called Tikkun HaOlam. Now, first of all, we're going to break apart this word. Olam means,
World.
and what does Olam mean? Hidden. Olam means hidden. Same words, different vowels. Olam means hidden. Okay? So, it's biblically. So, the world. Tikkun, reparation. This phrase has been co-opted in some disgusting ways.
What?
It's been taken over in so many disgusting ways. It does not mean social action.
No.
Okay? It's not what it means. I'm sorry. It does not mean BLM, Antifa. It does not mean being a social warrior. Okay? That's not what the temples, what a temple says Tikkun Olam. That's not what this traditionally means. Tikkun Olam means that each of us have a piece of repairing the world because we're part of God. That's part of us and we're part of God. We each have a piece of repairing the world that only we can do. I can't do yours. You can't do mine. And so the analogy I've always made is, it's as if we are each to find an instrument to play in God's symphony. And we each have to spend that time not first finding the instrument and then playing the one note we're supposed to play in tune. So if you're supposed to play sax and you're supposed to play violin, stop trying to play sax and stop trying to play the stand-up bass, right? To find our instrument to play it in tune. And that's this for decades. When we all can do that, that's what the sound of heaven is. That's the sound of heaven. That's the holiness of a kahal, the holiness of a holy community. And it's not about social action. The vast majority of Reformed synagogues in the nation will talk about Tikkun HaOlam, and that means we need to go give to BLM, and that means we need to go march with Antifa, and that means we need to go try and say that we're Martin Luther King, who would not be on board with any of that stuff right now. And it means that we need to go cheer for the Palestinians. Now you laugh, except when Israel was being bombed, okay? What is that, 9 months ago, give or take?
Yeah.
Okay. A group of a little over 100 rabbinic and cantorial students from this country, from Reform and conservative synagogues, wrote a public letter condemning Israel and condoning Palestine because of their interpretation of Tikkun Olam.
It's a disease of the mind.
But it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be finding Tikkun Olam really means, and they even made the reference, I think, to saying, oh, the Tikkun is, we have to do this and fix the Tikkun Olam is a personal piece that we each need to do to find why are we here? What are we here to do? Do it. It was, how many remember the Splash Mountain ride at Disneyland?
Oh my
Used to be an old sign on it that said, you can't run away from your troubles, there ain't no place that far. Right? You can't run from your tikkun. There ain't no place that far. We will find, we need to do that. So Judaism, all that we're going to study, and all the rituals and all the practices are to get us to one. Hineni. Throughout the Torah, throughout the Bible, God asks our sages, Ayecha, which means where do you stand? Hineni means I am present. Since the sands are always shifting, it means you got to be present in the moment. And all of our rituals are to help us be present, really present in our relationship with each other, with God, with life. And that, as a result, we can then have our Tikkun Olam. And then, only then, we can really have peace, real shalom, a real peace. Okay. We have more readings to do through here. And if you can read before we have class, it's even better. Yes.
Where is the concept of Tikkun Olam? when it was, where it was
I think so, but I-
originated, who
I
coined that?
I think it's originally a Talmudic term, but I have to look it up. I think
Is that
that's,
a Kabbalistic term?
no, no, you're talking about the shattering. You're talking about the shattering, and Tikkun is not. Yes, but all right. Quick 5-minute introduction we're going to do later on, okay? Just because if I don't, I can tell some of you are going to get lost. There are only 2 questions in the universe for those who are inspired to really deepen their relationship, their awareness of their relationship with God. How and why did God create the world? How and why does God sustain it? Okay, make sense?
Yeah.
Those are 2 questions. Everything else is details.
Yeah.
Okay? How and why did God create it? How and why does God sustain it? And so there have always been 2 schools since before Talmud. There's 2 schools. What we call Maaseh Bereshit, the workings of creation, and Maaseh Merkavah, the workings of the chariot. The workings of the chariot are based on the description of the heavenly court that we see in the book of Ezekiel. It's also recapitulated in the book of Isaiah with the heavenly court. So one is Maaseh Bereshit, how and why did God create the world? Maaseh Merkavah, how and why does God sustain it? Do this very quickly. Don't worry, a couple months we're going to go much more into detail. Okay? And for those inclined to want to deepen their awareness of their relationship with God in a conscious type of way, they start studying that. And they start exploring that. And that goes through Talmud. It's Jewish mysticism. And it goes through Talmud. And part of it has to do with the concept of Yahud. Yahud means unification. It has to do with the concept of Devakut. Devakut means cleaving. So instead of being like this or like this or even like this, you're like that. Right?
Mhm.
And then we have these 2 schools, Maaseh Bereshit and Maaseh Merkavah. And the Ramchal writes things. There's Talmud, there's Sefer Yetzirah, there's Bahir, there's all these different texts that really go into explaining that deeper and deeper and deeper. Understand it with our finite minds and our infinite souls to understand it at a deeper level. Everyone with me?
Mhm.
Then you get this guy named Isaac Luria. Rabbi Isaac Luria is called Ha'ari, which means the Holy Rabbi Isaac, or the Lion. It's an acronym for his name. And he takes from both schools and he integrates them. And his disciples then learn this integrated work of Maaseh Bereshit and Maaseh Merkavah. You guys all still with me on this?
Mhm.
And part of the concept, which is talked about in Talmud but in other places, is this idea that you cannot find something with a closed hand, and that we need to lekabel, which means to receive. Okay? Can't grab it, it needs to receive it. And that becomes known as Lurianic Kabbalah.
Huh.
Okay? Today, when people say, I'm studying Kabbalah Center, or whatever it may be, what they're really doing is learning the dogma of Lurianic Kabbalah without understanding how Luria got there. So I try very hard not to use the term Kabbalah because of the connotations with it, but just the idea of Jewish mysticism. And that's what we were just learning, wasn't it?
Mhm.
Except as opposed to making it separate, it's just part of everything else. There's a saying in Taoism, they say that for the person who does not know the Tao, the way, a cup is a cup and a tree is a tree. For the student of the Tao, a cup is no longer a cup, a tree is no longer a tree. For the master of the Tao, a cup is a cup and a tree is a tree. Just at a deeper level. Okay? The moment we separate out, we're missing a lot of the point. And so when we get to that place, we will study Jewish mysticism. We will not be studying Kabbalah. Okay? So when people talk about the Sfirot, when they talk about the pathways, and they talk about Beitz Chaim and all these different terms, it's based on meditation, it's based on understanding, and it's very, very clear. And it's in Torah, and it's in Talmud. How many of you have ever studied any Kabbalah at all? Okay, so the idea of these energy centers,
Yeah.
right? Okay. Another word, this is just to give you an idea. Another word for chesed, which is compassion, is gedula, which means bigness. Okay? Just want to just put that out. That's another word that our Talmudic sages do. You don't have to remember this one. So how many of you have been to a Saturday morning service?
Ever?
Never?
No, I said ever.
Ever,
Okay.
ever, okay? And the Torah comes out, and what do we get up and do?
Same.
Lecha, go on. Adonai Hagedula, v'Hagevu, v'Hatiferet, v'Hanetzach, v'Hahod. Wait. Right there, isn't it? Those of you who learn the Sifrot, that's the names of the Sifrot, isn't it? Then what does it say? Ki kol b'shamayim, all that is in the heavens, ki kol b'shamayim, because that's where creation happens, right? Be'aretz, malchut. Ki kol b'shamayim, be'aretz. That's right there in the text, isn't it? Luria didn't come, these names didn't just come about. And when you learn them just as names, it's dogma, and it means nothing. When you learn it as the experience of understanding, we will. When we get to that place, we got to get base. We got to get the base.
You gotta get on the first page of Jonah.
You got to get the base. So here's one other thing.
No, meant in the future. I didn't
Yes.
know.
So here's an example. It says we were made, but B'Tselem Hashem, the image of God. So if I take this Yud Hey Vav Hey, I make it vertical. It's a human being.
Yeah.
Wow,
Now, in the structure.
that's crazy.
Now, did I put this? I may have put this in here. I don't
Yes,
know.
you do.
I did. Okay, so I did. I'm so glad you know I did. Because I can remember. Okay, so right. So now I have a question, right? Here's here. Right here's the image. But I can't make them connect. I can make them connect. Now I got a question. Okay, if you're an architect, just looking at this structure, what is the foundation point that is the single strongest place of this structure? Looking at it as a piece of art or a structure. It's this place right here, isn't it? Okay? Which we call Yesod, which means foundation. That's why they're called that. They're not calling it for dogma. And the problem is people learn Kabbalah and it becomes dogma. And who cares?
Yeah.
Right, I think, thank you. All right, so the point is, all of it is to experience God, to experience that. It is overwhelming. That's why we need to learn. There's some other readings. Thank you for being kind to me this week. Because I will see you next week.
Yeah.
For sure. And,
That's a good manuscript.
Thank you.
Thank you for the class.
Toda.
so is that good?
Yeah.
Worthwhile?
Wow.
Very much.
That's great.
Yeah.
And you just thought I was some guy with a ponytail that looked like a biker at a wedding. Come on, they see me coming in a suit. They say, "Is that the raga guy or is that the guy from the Harley Davidson store?"
Can I just ask you a really
Anything.
basic question?
I didn't know there was such.
There are like,
We've turned off, right? Oh, we're still going? Okay, no, that's fine.
no, this is a term